On the line with us, our old friend Patty Lovera. She is the Assistant Director of Food and Water Watch. foodandwaterwatch.org is the website, and you can tweet her at food and, it's spelled A-N-D, food and water. Patty, welcome back to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So you guys are out there calling out the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA. How has Trump put his mark? And I shouldn't just say Trump. I mean, this is just a Republican thing. As Mitt Romney pointed out in the Washington Post today, everything Trump is doing policy-wise is exactly what the Republicans all love. So I guess I should say, what has the Republican imprint on the USDA wrought?
Oh, boy. Well, that's a long list. There's changes to the way the agency is actually running. So there's a proposal to take a couple key divisions of USDA that do things like research and on economics and things like that, and move them out of Washington, D.C., which essentially moves them out of the decision making. There's, a proposal that we went through this long process for several years to try to get a farm bill done, and one of the sticking points was, what is the program that provides a safety net for hungry people? SNAP, right, which used to be called food stamps. So we got through a farm bill without really doing too much damage to that program, and just days later, the USDA announced they're going to make it harder for states to provide flexibility for folks to basically impose more work requirements so you can get that safety net benefit. So, kind of across the board, they're executing that kind of, whether it's more hostile to regulations that might protect farmers or more hostile to low-income folks who need those protections, is kind of what you would expect.
But the most egregious one, it seems, is this labeling rule on GMOs.
Right, and they had some help with that. This isn't all that new. Some of this predates the Trump administration, but they've carried on the tradition. So right before Christmas, we got a final rule from the USDA about how they're going to implement something that Congress passed 2 years ago in 2016 about how to label genetically engineered foods. And so the law that Congress passed back 2 years ago, we weren't happy with. I talked to you a bunch of times because we didn't need it. We didn't have a problem. We had Vermont had gone first and passed a really good law that was going to give consumers information on their food. And the biotech industry and the processed food industry came to Washington and said, we can't have this good state law. Congress, you have to block it. And that's what that law did. And so they said, states can't do this. We're going to have the federal government do it. USDA will write these rules, and we finally got the rules, and not surprisingly, they're not very good.
Well, it wasn't. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is just from memory here, but my recollection was that when Vermont said, "Okay, you have to say in plain English on the front of the label, whether this product contains genetically modified organisms or not," and the USDA came along and said, or the Republicans came along and said, I guess in Congress, and said, yes, we need to inform the public. The public wants to know. So we're going to put it in a QR code or whatever it's called. So there's this little, barcode or a little square block with funny little black squiggles in it that if you put that on a scanner, it will tell you whether there's a GMO in there, but there's no way you can look at the label and actually know it unless you happen to be a computer. Do I have that right?
Yeah, there's going to be scenarios that's what people get. So there's a bunch of problems with the rule that we just got and some of those problems were baked into the law that Congress passed. One of them is the definition of what requires a label is a lot weaker than what Vermont did. Mm-hmm. And then even if you get to the point where the labeling is required, they gave companies options. So they can put it on the package with words, but they don't have to. But you could use one of those other options, which includes what they call a digital scannable code, which is this QR code, which you have to have a cell phone, you have to have a smartphone, you have to have a signal, and you have to have the app that lets you read that code, which is not a label. A label is words on a package that I can use with my eyes and my hand and flip it over and read the words. And so, it really excludes a lot of people, and it's not labeling.
Yeah, this is like the Republicans saying, people want choice in education, so let's give them private, for-profit schools. People want, to be able to know if their foods have genetically modified organisms, so let's bury it in a QR code. This is nuts. So, Patty, what kind of pushback is happening? What are you all doing at foodandwaterwatch.org, and how? Is there any specific legislation coming up? Are there any issues around any of these things that have to do with food stamps or GMO labeling or whatnot, where there are opportunities for citizen activism where we can be contacting our elected representatives? Is there anything happening at the state level? What's going on with all these things?
So lots of there's places you can find to take action on food issues wherever you want, local or state or federal. When we're talking about the things we've just mentioned in terms of how USDA is running, what are we going to get from this labeling program? We do actually need Congress to rein USDA in. So this is a final rule, unfortunately, so it's moving forward, but that doesn't mean that Congress can't change it and change the law that created this final rule. And so we have a new House. As folks are getting to know their new, especially members of the House, but also members of the Senate, they need to hear that their work is not done on this. What they did in 2016 wasn't good enough, and it's not going to give people accurate labels anytime soon that are actually useful. And so Congress needs to take another shot at this and need to start hearing that. So I think, it's basically an election year already. They're going to be home a lot. You need to start talking to them about this is the kind of stuff we're going to hold you accountable on.
Yeah. Okay. Step by step. Patty, thanks so much for dropping by today.